start the recording. All right, thanks everyone. It is December 8th, and this is our December monthly land use meeting, Thursday. It's 6:32. We're gonna get the meeting started. Folks are still gonna be joining on. We can get through some of the earlier pieces. Agenda. Anybody have additional things to add, or do we need to move stuff around?
Nope.
All right. I do think that we're going to have somebody may show up for after 7:30. That's going to be the individual, Sam Axelrath, who's the one who has that petition open for the 44th and Tejon property. He reached out to me asking about next steps. And, you know, he's reached out to Amanda's office, who said, we can't do anything. But there's a bigger conversation about what he was after on that one particular property, and that is the conversation we need to start on design overlay itself for the entire corridor. And you know, that's gonna, like our conservation overlay, it's another overlay. It's gonna have lots of process and procedures about public input, town halls, you know, postcards. So this petition, it's got like 500 people, just about like 490, something like that. 500 people have signed that. That tells me and tells us that people are concerned about the loss of commercial property, or just concerned that 44th shouldn't lose all of its commercial property, and that 44th is an important corridor for the neighborhood. So I think we personally have, as a neighborhood organization, have the mandate to ask city council, you know, and the city to consider this and to move it forward. So I think that's the larger conversation. I think the horse is out of the barn on this particular property. When we first learned about it, it was April of this year, and it had not been finalized through the site review plan. I have followed up with the inspector just about 2 weeks ago, and it is completely done. Now, this person's been working on it for over a year and a half. I do not think, you know, they're going to say, oh, let me just scrap that and start this all over again, the owner. So I do think that this property, we may not be able to do anything on, but we can use this petition and the momentum and what people want to address the broader 44th.
When you said you talked to the inspector and it was all done, is this reviewed and already approved?
Correct. This is the site review plan, site development plan, SDP.
It's they just made it through SDP. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And he's not doing anything that he doesn't have the right to do.
Correct.
So it's used by right. It's used by right.
It's just all the inspections, the building permits, the, you know, the review of all that has been approved. That was open for a while. So yeah, I do think that opportunity is lost. Okay, so so we may have, you know, he's going to come up, and I don't know if Anthony Caselli of the SUNY property will show up. You know, and if he does, we would let him kind of talk a little bit about that. If not, I think we're good. Anybody public have any comments? We're opening this up to anyone if they have any comments to make. Keep it to a few minutes so we can allow everybody who wants to speak about something. Nick, Matt, you guys have any comments or anything that you want us to consider?
I just had a question about that 44th and Tejon property. That's owned and being developed by the Modus Group, right?
No.
Oh, it's not.
It is, no. It's Can West LLC.
Okay.
They're out of Summit County somewhere.
Gotcha. I just remember seeing their flyer or their banner there. Maybe they were just doing the leasing.
Yeah. And I think you know, they may have been involved in the transactional side of it, selling to this individual, but that's not who's developing this. Interestingly enough, I knew they had some involvement when I ran into them. This is back in April, May, you know, when I ran into them, they're like, yeah, I believe it's going to have commercial. And I was like, well, that's wonderful, until I started looking into the SDP process and and then other permits with, drawings and renderings, like your electrical and plumbing permits. And then it became apparent that there is no commercial on there. And that's when I asked Modus to, can they connect me? I was hoping that they could have a soft introduction. Well, they tried twice, kind of like, and the guy never responded.
Really?
And then with this petition, and there was a story in North Star, the North Star, the writer, he actually sent out an email to CanWest as well, and they never responded. So that's kind of where that is.
It's
Wow.
a perfect mirror of developmental problems.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a way we can start a publicity campaign about this even before we get involved in starting a actual committee that starts the process of writing another overlay, and just start to sway public opinion so that we can get out in front of any, what I mean? We're already behind the 8 ball or behind the curve. And if we can get sort of a publicity campaign going, maybe public opinion will be enough that developers that have ideas
that's
will
the petition,
think
right?
twice.
So that was the petition, and that was started by a resident saying, hey, do you think it's a good idea? I'm like, it's something, try it, see where we go. And I think there is a lot of support for that property and all of them. It's a weird corridor because it jumps around. There's
Right.
MS, nothing, MS, nothing.
Well, but
and then
38
2 and 3 stories.
Yeah, but 38th does that too. If you look, I mean, there's
Yeah.
still single-use family housing on 38th.
Yeah. Well, I
which
know for
seems-
sure one other property, and we've talked about it on this, right? That's going to happen too. We had him come talk to us. He didn't have to. We reached out because somebody wanted to, actually one of his neighbors wanted to oppose a variance he was looking for, but what he was doing in terms of the residences and not having any businesses was actually by right. So that's already 2 properties, and we still have others that are either on sale or this could happen. The one where Better Buzz is, that's a problem. That's another one that could happen to the
The
senior.
one up there next to Sunny's. Sunnyside Supper Club, but like 2 blocks down, that big commercial
Yeah,
space.
The senior center.
Senior
The
center.
senior
moved.
center one. Yeah,
They
that's on
moved.
the market too.
I know. If
You know
I
what's
had
interesting?
$1.8 million, I'd
Oh, I
buy
know.
it.
I want to do some business in there totally.
Oh, well, wait, hold on. Do we need to start? How many people here want to jump in on this?
Is this the investment club or is this the?
Yeah.
We're switching. Yes, we're gonna create an investment club out of it. Now, and what's interesting is that they're also looking for someone to lease it to, because the agent reached out to another business in the neighborhood who texted me and said, hey, you might know this already. They asked me if I wanted it. It's not going to work for me, but maybe you know other people. So that's when I was like, well, are they having a hard time selling? Or,
It's been on the market for a while.
Well, that's part of it. And, I think the one thing working for us is the market is slowly going down. The mortgage rates are going up. That may put a little delay on how quickly some of these things would otherwise move forward. Maybe people are waiting for it to tank further, so that it makes it more affordable. So that may be the only saving grace for us on other projects that this is going to happen to.
Well, financing is expensive right now.
Correct.
The rub that I have an issue with is the plans called it a live work unit.
Yes,
That's
well,
what they called the project. I don't know if that takes special permitting from Denver. I don't know if we have any legs to stand on there to push them, because I like what happened at Cobbler's Corner with the live work on the side street. It's actually businesses on the bottom, residential up top.
yes.
So when I saw that, I originally was like, yeah, this is great. But that's the same story we got from the developer at SUNI and 44th, which just turned into slot homes.
Correct.
They
It
said,
is.
oh, it could be live work, but obviously
Yeah,
it's not.
to me, everything is live work today.
Yeah.
Meaning my house
We're
is
all
live
working,
work.
right?
So like put an office in your home, it's live work. So I don't quite know what that means. And honestly, without,
Well, if it's new,
but I can assure you it's apartments. Okay. Cause I was like,
right.
ask the person who was reviewing this to say, just to be clear, these are 15 apartments, correct? And she's like, yep.
Yeah, that's a loss, definitely at that corner.
Well, the
Oh.
resistance we're going to get is the increased costs of construction for places when you have mixed use on them. Like, because the fire code restrictions are so much more stringent than if it's a single use occupancy. So, I don't know what that means when they list it as a live work. Like you said, Drew, like everything can be a live work. Yeah.
I mean,
it's-
unless they're calling them flexible units that, they've created it in a way where walls can be moved and knocked down without any structural changes to turn it into commercial. And like the kitchen becomes a restaurant kitchen. I can't imagine this is anything other than, but yeah, it is called live work, but it is
And
definitely all
if they
just
were
apartments.
responsive and communicative, they would have come
Correct.
out and just said, hey, this is how it's going to be. You're going to love it. And instead, they don't even bother to answer.
Yeah. And my thought was, if we can even get them to the table, as a committee, as a community, maybe we can work hard to try to get them a third floor. Because here's the other
Right.
thing, going forward with stuff on NPI and densification and missing middle, the thought of upzoning parts of our neighborhood are already on the table. And the thought of doing that along the corridors is going to be better than doing it throughout the neighborhood. So that is on the corridor. Like I would go to bat, to say,
Absolutely.
you should go for third story if we're going to get the commercial here. That would be fair. That would give them
Absolutely.
the extra units.
And when they have 500 people show up at the council meeting agreeing with that, they would
Right.
totally get it.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the thought back in April, but we just really didn't, the guy doesn't want to talk to us, and that's fine. So Rod, back to your publicity campaign. I mean, we have a petition. That's kind of the campaign. We are working with Neighborhood Planning Initiative. They know about this petition too, because I've been, and they know that this corridor is important. And they're the ones who said, well, maybe we can move this along, simultaneously, concurrently with moving the Neighborhood Planning Initiative. And for that reason, I think that's why Amanda's not taking anything up. Right? She'll work
Well,
with
no,
other groups.
I
doing
get that,
this.
and I don't know if it's appropriate for a committee member to propose this, but like just some sort of thing where maybe we get the current businesses to put in their window like a catchy, little 8.5 by 11 flyer that we print up that's like save our commercial district or something like that with a a catchphrase that it shows support from the rest of the businesses in the community and the neighbors. That's just something that people see on a daily basis and understand that this is coming and it's on its way. And you could, the surveys are great and get the technical support that we need to show when it comes down to making these decisions,
Right.
but it's not something that engages like the community at large that missed the survey, or it's not in their faces like every day. And I think if everybody went to everybody goes to those restaurants along 44th, a few times a month, if they saw like a flyer there that said, hey, we're working on saving this as a great community business corridor.
It's a great idea.
Flyers are cheap. All we have to do is design them. I'm being
Well, I
honest.
have a
Flyers are
color
super cheap.
printer, so I could print them and I'd offer
Okay.
my printer up. I mean, it only does up to 11 by 17, but I don't think you want to put something huge in a business.
No, that's
window
usually the
anyway.
number.
But
Yeah, no,
We should do one
I
on
think
the fence
I
that
think
says
that's fair.
Commercial.
What's that?
We should get a big banner hanging on the fence that says this could be commercial.
I don't think we can put it on their banner without asking them permission.
I'll do it.
We
in
can put it across the street.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'll tell you,
I think that crosses the line of the committee there, Matt.
Okay. Strike that from
Yeah.
the record.
Yes,
Yeah, I know that Jimmy Neg, Monkey Barrel, was also hoping that it was commercial because it helps him too. It's an anchor and he would prefer to see that as commercial. People go over there, they learn about his bar. I mean, so I think he too was like, oh, why isn't that commercial? Now, saying, I don't know that, if he'd want us, if he'd be open for us to put that, the signs and banner, but I think that's a reasonable thing to do. But I do think we want to work lockstep with the city and we really want to get this on their radar to move forward. What our committee can do is be supportive and helpful in the public engagement process and kind of that campaign so that happens, that is happening when it should, and that we're getting to as many people as possible. So I think our committee does have a role to play in moving this conversation forward.
Well, this is really not that difficult of a subject. I mean, really what it is, if you read the first few lines of MS zoning, the intent was there, but where they fell
Correct.
short was they didn't make the commercial element of it mandatory. It's only optional.
Right.
But
I think it
when
could
you
be like
read
a
all of the
one-word
language,
overlay.
all the language is already there
Correct.
about
I
how this
agree.
is supposed to encourage it. And you know, for the most part, people do put it in or did, but the business models have changed for developers, and they're stripping all of that out of there when they realized they could.
All right, guys, we have to move forward. Matt,
hang on.
was that sufficient to answer your question about this property?
So,
And
Jonathan?
And then some.
Yeah, Jonathan,
Before-
did you have something you wanted to say?
yeah, I have a question, which is, has anyone else made an amendment / overlay that is already pre-written, pre-approved for another
Yes.
neighborhood that says you must, that all it really says is you must do commercial in an MX?
Yeah, this is, it's an MS right now,
MS,
not MX.
MS,
Sam.
That's the reason.
No, that's
And
okay.
yes, that is the Tennyson overlay. Santa Fe is now using this. Tennyson was developed in a
Okay.
way so that it was easily adopted, so people didn't have to start from scratch.
Right,
There
'cause then
was
we don't
a
have to
slight
write it.
issue. And actually, Bill, isn't West Highland pursuing this for 32nd, or has at least discussed pursuing this for 32nd?
Yes, and Amanda believes, I don't know whether it's final yet or not, but she has gotten a graduate student assigned to work with both 44th and 32nd for design overlay.
Oh,
But
great.
that resource isn't going to be available, I think, until, I don't remember the timing, March, April, May, June, somewhere in there.
But we could reach out to her and maybe follow along with
Yeah,
where they are.
Melissa's not on here right now, but you know what? I'm gonna write that down as something to follow up. Again, back to what our committee can do. We could start putting the information out there and letting people know that we're moving towards this, to start building up the interest, the engagement, and just kind of the information, even before it actually starts, because I think that's always our biggest challenge, is to make sure people know this is happening and, know when to provide input, good or bad. But thank you, Bill, because we haven't heard that from Amanda, and Melissa's not on. So I'm guessing she's not going to be able to do her update, but that's okay. We have links to the site where to their site, where every archived report of the newsletter and the land use committee is available in one of our folders. So, all right, thanks guys. Thanks, Bill. So we're gonna skip over land use updates from city council, but on the conservation overlay, oh, wait, Jonathan, you got something more?
I have 2 public comments,
Oh, go for it.
super fast, because I think one, this is completely the wrong venue for. So just tell me that it's the wrong venue for.
Before you start, I could do that. You already know that.
The bicycle lane stuff going in down Clay, wrong venue?
No, this is the right venue. Bicycle
Okay.
lane on Clay.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
bicycle stuff that's going in on Clay, does anyone have a Doty contact that they could pass on to me? Because I bicycle commute, I go down Clay, I get on 35th, and I take the 35th bicycle corridor.
Okay,
They have just made changes to the 35th bicycle corridor that have made it more dangerous for me to ride my bike to work, to the
Okay,
point
so-
where I've had an incident already. And those are probably what they're planning to put in on Clay.
So this falls under, and I think we're in 2 years of this project. It's the Community Transportation Network, CTN. The project's been going on for a couple of years. This was part of the 125 miles that they had money for the lanes, right? And this is where
Yep.
46 has gotten the painting. We've got the bollards on like SUNY, but that whole network, in terms of all of Northwest Denver, where they were going, all the public comment period, Lowell was a big area that a lot of folks had disagreement on.
Right, and they
Tejon,
moved it off Lowell.
yeah, and Tejon is a similar thing where, a lot of businesses objected to it. So that current Shero is one that we don't know that that's going to stay in the final picture. So I can connect you to the project team for Community Transportation Network. But if you
Okay.
Google that under Dottie, you're going to get to them. OV Consultants are the folks who've been managing that. And then Geneva Hooten has been the project person at Dottie. But I can send you both of those contacts. I don't
That
have
would be
them right now.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
because
so
they're
that's,
slowly updating the one at 41st in Clay. They, first they did
Yes.
the lines and then they came back and painted the bump outs and
Right.
maybe in a couple weeks we'll get cones,
bollards.
Yeah.
the bollards.
They're gonna keep you safe. What was the second thing,
Yeah.
Jonathan?
The second thing is that 4226th Clay, which is, it's what I call an alley house, where the house is set way back at the alley and not up at the front line.
Yep.
That property appears to have been purchased by a developer. A
Yep.
sign went up recently that said that they're going for a Board of Adjustments hearing.
Yep.
My take on the sign is that they're trying to subdivide the property into two pieces so that they can
Yes.
build two houses. They never
believe
came,
you're right.
so they're
No.
going to the BOA without us.
Right,
But it's not
And they can.
conforming and they're going for a variance. So the problem is the existing little house in the back. And I don't know the exact details of what they were denied for, but I used to know the previous owners of that property and I've been in that house. It would be too large to be considered an ADU.
Right.
And it's in the back 35% of the lot, and it has a deck that the previous owners put on there without a permit. And so a second floor deck, which is not allowed. So I know there's at least two violations that don't allow that to be conforming, and for them to split that parcel in half, which would make them the 4,900 square foot lots, 37.5 foot wide.
Right.
And what they would be going for is a C1. And my guess is, as a developer, what they would like to do is build two new homes, one on each property up at the front, of each of the new properties.
Right.
And where the existing garage is in the back, make that into an ADU. So basically it goes from a single house on the one property to four houses on two. And I don't think they can get that unless the city says, oh, you're grandfathered in or something with the existing building, because that thing is a 2-story. It's got to be bigger than 1,000 square feet.
Yeah. The other problem they're going to have is that when they go to subdivide, half of that property is going to have a garage sitting on it.
Yes.
And you cannot make a new property that only has a garage. So they're going to have to tear the garage down to do their subdivision so that they can build a new garage.
Yeah, I
hey
don't
guys,
know.
just to interrupt, I want
Yeah.
to welcome, we've got Keith, right? From Board of Adjustments. Yep, from Board of, I
It's
just
Austin
noticed.
Keithler, but close
Oh,
enough.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I am on too many emails. Austin, I apologize.
No worries.
Austin's from Board of Adjustments and he's got a presentation. He just sent it to me earlier today. I have loaded it onto our drive, and he is going to be up next as far as explaining Board of Adjustments, kind of a 101. I'm not sure I've seen a BOA 101 in the last few years. And I thought it'd be important for our group to kind of understand. Now, I had asked him originally to maybe take the SUNY property and work on and give us kind of use that as an example to work through to help us understand how the process works. But that one is now rescheduled because they're changing up things, and we'll get to that. But so we don't have a particular one to look at. However, maybe we can look at this one to just get a better understanding of what rules and regulations or criteria BOA would have to look at for the 4226 Clay. And Austin, apologize. Jonathan just brought this up right now saying, this individual or this developer has not brought it to our attention, looking for our support. And, we haven't reached out to him if they haven't reached out to us on this particular project. But if there's time for you to look that one up, maybe that might be one to explain to us what's going on.
Possibly. I think that one's actually going to be on our agenda next week.
Yes.
Whoa, okay.
So that one is upcoming. I can give you kind of a quick overview. As I mentioned, I'd kind of prefer not to discuss cases too in depth because I'm not, it's not my case. I'm not trying to prove it should or should not be approved. So, I
And
don't
we
mind
don't
kind
want
of,
that. I think we need to understand that when a case comes up to BOA, like this particular one, this one was looking at splitting a lot potentially, what guidelines and regulations the BOA, has to follow to, because it's semi, quasi judicious,
Sure.
these determinations. So like, we don't understand that because we don't get involved in as many BOA things as we do on larger rezones, because those folks who are rezoning always approach us. So we just have
Sure.
more experience with those projects than we do with BOA, which is why I've also invited you to, do this, because just first, so whatever you can share about that particular, from the standpoint of how BOA would handle this, and not whether they approve or not, but what do they have to look at? What do they have to prove, or what boxes do they have to check in order to be able to approve it? So whatever
Sure.
you can explain there. So folks, I'm gonna, because Austin could, join right now and we're just 2 minutes away. I think we have time for the other two updates before we let Austin go. Conservation overlay, Rod, do you want to do this or do you want me to do it?
Sure. So I just received this from Amanda this evening, the update on the overlay. Let's see, let me get the dates here. They're going to have a planning. The planning board is confirmed for January 4th at 3:30 p.m. To review the overlay. And then they set a date for, basically, I think what it was decided is that this would affect any projects that were submitted after the day that the overlays were made publicly available for review.
October
which
21st.
which was October 21st of this year.
Yep.
So any projects submitted for permit after that date would be subject to conform to the overlay once it's approved. And then the one big thing is now we need to get these letters in, and we just got the template for the letter. And I think I'll make sure does everybody on the board or committee get that?
We will send this out broadly. So
Okay.
at like next week, my thought is we might do a special newsletter. So this can get included in what's coming up, because the information didn't come to us before our newsletter went out. So we will do a special newsletter. We'll make sure there's a link to the letter template. We'll put in the ask of folks to show up either to planning board and or write a letter of support. And I think everybody it gets CC to is in the template.
Yeah, and we want to really get that letter out there. So as many people as you can share that around with, the better, for support there. So I think that's where we are, and that's the next hurdle, is to get
I
over
thought
the.
it was at planning board today.
No,
January 4th.
because remember the public period ended November 20th. And we've gone through answering individual people's questions and complaints, whatever it is, of clarification. Yeah. Rod and another architect, Kevin, who are on the work group, were taking care of that. So, and then they kind of look back and say, is there anything else that needs to be tweaked? I don't believe we need to tweak anything further than what's on the text amendment. And so, after that period is when then they would schedule the planning board. So that is the date. And now it's confirmed. It wasn't confirmed yesterday. Today it is confirmed for the 4th. That was what we were shooting for. And I don't think she put this in her email. But one thing is that there will be postcards. Oh, there's Melissa. Hi. There's going to be postcards that go out about the planning board hearing in the whole neighborhood. And they should be going out on or around December 19th. And that will tell them that on the 4th is this hearing and how they can participate. And there'll also be yard signs also publicizing this hearing. And they're going to be coming in throughout the neighborhood. So right around December 19th, more outreach and communication is set to happen on top of what Sunnyside will do to get it on our platforms and into a newsletter. I didn't see that in her email, but she did verbalize that to me when she called me earlier this afternoon. And Bill, do you want to give us an update on MPI?
Well, as you know, there's really been nothing substantive in the last month since our last meeting. But I think the thing that is very worthy of noting is that on the 15th, I think it's 1 o'clock, but I could be off by an hour. There is a focus meeting for the industrial area of Sunnyside. So if anybody on this Zoom call would like to join.
Actually, Bill, it's not open to the public. I did verify that. That's what Sung said, that it is only for the landowners and property owners impacted in that area.
Well,
And
that's
our steering
different.
committee.
That's different input that I have from Sung. So
Really? Okay.
Well, I never asked him if it was open to the public. I asked him whether or not anybody that was interested was welcome, and he said yes.
Okay.
So anyway, personally, I think having additional people is additive. So even if Sung said it wasn't open to the public, I would disagree and say that interested parties, and from what I can see, everybody in this meeting is an interested party. If you'd like to have an input, they've been really good meetings. We've had, I think, 3 of them now. The last 2, they've kind of gotten better with each meeting. And I think the consultants have done some good work. So I'm going to be curious to see what they're bringing to the table this time around.
What date is that? Well, Bill, could you repeat that?
I think it's Thursday, whatever the 15th is.
The 15th.
Thursday.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's held over at the rec center.
And we've got our next steering committee meeting coming up next week as well. And then the project team will give us an update on, them getting all the feedback that they received in this phase to help come up with the recommendations, the draft recommendations. So I don't know when they'll be available, but that's kind of the conversation that the steering committee will have with them next week. So I guess we'll learn there. I did learn that, remember last time we talked, we had only 160 folks who did the survey. That number's up to 600 now. So I think that's a good thing, that they did get more people involved in taking the survey for that phase. And hopefully, maybe in January, we can ask them to come, and I'll put that on my ask to Sung to see if they'll come and share where they are in January. I assume they'll be getting much closer, and maybe the next phase of public outreach may be on their radar. Any questions on that before we turn this over to Austin?
Nope.
Austin, you should be able to share. See
Okay.
if you can do that.
It
And I'll
says you
stop
cannot
sharing.
share screen.
Yep, I'm going to stop sharing. There you go. See if you can do that.
All righty.
This presentation is in a folder called BOA 101 in our public land use drive.
Yep, I wasn't quite sure where to start, what sort of familiarity everyone has with BOA. So if I cover some information that you're well aware of and don't need that information, I guess let me know. We can kind of skip past it. Also trying to just do kind of a quick overview, who we are, what we do, what we look at, and what we care about, stuff like that. So certainly if it'll be more beneficial to kind of have questions, or if there's anything that I'm not covering and you're interested in, let me know and we'll talk about it. So what is the Board of Adjustment? Basically, all of this text says that we are a board. We work with community planning and development, but we are not part of community planning and development. Basically, CPD is the very large agency that handles all sorts of permits, rezonings, anything development related in Denver. They are an enormous department. We are a very tiny department. The only thing that we're really here for is to handle appeals related to the zoning code. That's kind of our main focus. That's why we're around. So we have 5 regular board members. Having 5 people present is a full board for us. In the absence of a regular board member, we also have 2 alternates. So with that, we're usually able to staff a full board at our hearings. Sometimes things come up and we end up a person or 2 short, but we usually manage with a full board pretty well. So one thing that's important to know about our board specifically is, there are thousands of permits that are granted in Denver every year. Anything that meets code, we don't have anything to do with. We don't need to have anything to do with. We're here for when the code does not apply perfectly, when people think that a project should be able to go ahead and proceed even if it doesn't meet code. So with that, the only time that we're around is kind of when there are problem cases or conflicts with the code or things like that. Reason I bring that up is I know that sometimes we hear comments from the neighborhood that they think it's outrageous that we're even considering something that doesn't meet code. And I have to write back and let them know, it's what we do. That's why we exist, is to look at things that don't meet code. That's why we're around. And then only other thing here is just anything that the board looks at is done at a public hearing. So that is how we conduct business. Anything for the board to review is at public hearing. So kind of with that and with the way things are structured, we're sort of a secondary agency to community planning and development. You can't just walk up to my counter and say, I need a variance for something. I have to ask you, who told you that? What have you done already? And, if someone is just walking up and saying, I need a variance, I have to tell them you have to go talk to CPD first, submit plans for review. If they tell you you need a variance, they're going to send you over to me, but they have to be the ones to do it. Basically, we are an appeals agency, which means that you need some sort of a formal city action to appeal to start things off with us. And I will talk a little bit more about what that actually means a little bit later. But kind of the short version of that is usually by the time people get to our office, they've been in touch with city staff and with CPD for a while before they get to us. We are not their first point of contact. So looking at kind of case types and relief, because this is really, what kind of stuff comes into our office. Basically, there are 4 types of cases that the board hears, kind of based on just how they're ending up in front of us. We hear orders from neighbors, orders to cease and desist issued by neighborhood inspection services. This is basically for situations where people have done work and they didn't get permits for it first. Got flagged by the city, inspectors came out and they said, hey, there are these zoning issues. You can either, tear down what you built and make it comply with the code, or if you need extra time or want to try and keep it permanently, you can go to the Board of Adjustment and make that request. We hear denials of zoning permits from CPD. This is when people have a project in mind that they want to do. They, draw a plan, submit them for review, go to CPD, and CPD says you're going to have these issues. Could be, a setback issue or a height issue or, various other issues. But it's things that can't be overcome with the design, and they need to come to us and ask for a zoning variance. We see requests for zoning permit with special exception reviews. These are a specific type of use permit, which are generally allowed in an area, but there's a potential that it may be more impactful. So because of that, they have us as the reviewing body. So if we feel that it's maybe too impactful, or if there need to be specific conditions on a permit to limit impacts, we're the ones that can kind of look at that and decide if that's appropriate. And then the last type of case that we see is just appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator. These can be very wide ranging. It's basically that if there is any decision made by the city and people feel that they are negatively impacted by it, or that the city made it in error, we are the reviewing body to decide if we agree that the city has overstepped their bounds, misinterpreted the code, made decisions that otherwise conflict with the code and shouldn't have been made. So with that, it's a pretty broad topic. It covers a lot of ground, and it can be kind of a highly technical and difficult review to look at.
So on the appeals and administrative, the last one you talked about there.
Mhm.
Is there a cost for people to appeal decisions made by the city?
There is, yeah, there's a cost to all of our cases. It ranges from about $100 up to $400. Appeals of administrative determinations is the most expensive. That one is $400.
And that's for what purpose? Do you know?
Probably for a number of purposes. I will say that I've been here for about 10 years and the fees have been in place well before I started with the city. I think in part, those are a little bit more expensive because the city doesn't necessarily want all of its decisions questioned. It would be a very large administrative burden if it was just easy to kind of, informally walk up and say, hey, I think this is a problem. Because the city has to do a lot of work to prepare for those types of appeals. Because, well, most of our cases look at one single property, like I need a variance for a setback that's going to be for my property. Appeals of administrative decisions tend to be more rule-making issues. So just being able to challenge any rule that the city makes with very little hurdle would make it hard for them to really administer things terribly well.
But both of those items you mentioned would fall within that same area. Just one is more broad in their decisions. The other one is specific to a particular property. Is that right?
Between
Or they're two
variances and
separate
appeals?
areas that one would be a broad question. Another one would be just a specific issue on a property.
So let's see. Can you see my mouse on screen or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So up here where it's looking at orders to cease and desist, these are going to be things related to individual properties. Same thing with denials. It's, I want to build this development on this particular property. That's just looking at one property.
Is this like the parking variance? For instance, if somebody wants to
Sure.
build but wants to waive parking, it would fall under there.
Correct. Yeah, that'd be a
Okay.
single proposal, single property. We'd be looking at one variance. Should we waive the parking requirement for this project? That'd be it. Appeals of administrative decisions can just impact one property. It can be, I was asking to build this garage. I want it to face the street rather than the alley. That's the garage I have now, and I should be allowed to do that. The city is telling me that any new garage has to face the alley, but there's an exception in the code that says I can keep my street access driveway, and they're not letting me use that. That would be something where you are arguing that the city is wrong. They've made a mistake. They're misinterpreting the code. It only impacts one property, but it would still be an appeal of an administrative decision. On the flip side of that, our board got a lot of publicity last year when there were a number of appeals filed related to the temporary managed campsite use determination. That was basically the framework that the city put together to allow temporary managed campsites for the duration of the COVID pandemic. It's just a temporary use that you can set up, and they basically house people in ice fishing tents rather than in a full shelter. And that also fell under an appeal of an administrative decision, but that's something that was, big and far reaching. It was a rulemaking thing that was done for a code determination. It had the potential to impact many or any property in Denver. It wasn't about any specific site, and it was about kind of the logic that went into the rulemaking behind it. So that is also something that can be appealed to our board because it's a zoning decision that's been made. So just, anytime someone makes a decision like that, I don't think the city would necessarily want that to just be something that you could, not pay anything and go up and kind of throw a wrench in the works and, cause them to have to scramble and make sure that they could defend it sufficiently such that, the board and the general public would be able to come to the same determination. When we had those cases, I think we ended up with 4 cases, each of which had over 1,000 pages submitted for it. It was a ton of information, ton of work that went into it. So, it's just a lot for everyone to do. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate
Thank
it. Sorry, but no, that's very, very clear. So when the BOA makes a determination whether they agree with what this, zoning has decided or they disagree. I mean, is there another level of, I guess, the zoning committee can come back and say, no, we disagree, or is your decision making a final one?
There's almost never a final answer. In some ways, our decision is final. From the administrative remedy level, our decision is the final decision. We're kind of the appealing body from the zoning department. But you can appeal our decisions and take it up a notch, and that goes up to district court. That's reviewed under a civil suit, and the court reviews it. District court for us is a court of record, so they will look at what has been officially entered into the record. It's all the exhibits that the board looked at. It is a transcript of the hearing, and it is a summary of the findings for what the board found. That is what they will look at. They have to make their decision based on that and whatever briefs the attorneys submit to make their arguments. But you can't submit new information because you're trying to show that the board either acted correctly and we should uphold their decision, or they acted improperly and we should overturn it. We have to look at what the board looked at to make their decision, so you can't put new stuff in there that the board didn't look at.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks. We've got, I think, 26 slides. There is a lot of good information on here. I don't know if we should hold questions. Austin, I don't know if you think, it might be easier to hold the questions till the end in case somebody asks stuff that's kind of covered later.
I was going to say, I did kind of cover some of that topic under some of these next slides, but that's okay.
Yeah, go back to, please follow your presentation. Again,
Sure.
I think we have all of this available to look at. And I think going from here, if this group has additional things, like for instance, Austin, I may ask you like in the presentation to put in kind of some examples of each of the types, right? So people, get an idea and connect the dots about,
Sure.
oh, it would fall under this process. We may ask you to, elaborate on this a little bit, but for now, I know there's a lot of stuff that a lot of us are seeing for the first time. So
Sure. Yeah, no worries.
and we'll give you a little bit of extra time, as we need it, because I think people will be very interested. So
Sure.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think this is where I was at, basically just looking at, by case types, what does that mean? What can the board grant? We don't kind of have just carte blanche to do whatever we want. We have structure and framework we have to work within. So each of these types of cases kind of has a specific thing that the board needs to look at and decide if they should approve or not. So with orders to cease and desist, these are things like, my neighbor built a fence that's too tall. He didn't get permits for it. The code says I can't have it. It could also be I'm building a new house and I changed my mind on where I wanted to, put something, and now it's into the setback. I didn't update my plan, so the city only caught it once it was built, not in advance. So with things like that, it doesn't meet zoning, and we have to decide if we should let it stay permanently, which would be through a variance to allow something that doesn't meet zoning to stay there anyway. And if we don't, if we want to offer additional time to let them come into compliance. The board does have some specific limits on what we can grant. We can't just say, yeah, you can get to it whenever, but you can't keep it permanently. We can grant delays of enforcement for up to 6 months, or we can grant stays of enforcement for up to 5 years. I will elaborate on that a little bit in a couple of slides. With denials, this is for projects that someone is proposing that have not actually been built. It's basically, do we want to grant a variance to let them build it, or do we want to deny it and make them comply with code? This can be for a very wide range of things. It could be a parking variance, as has been alluded to. It could be a residential addition that's going to be in the setback. It could be a duplex that's going through the bulk plane, something that's going over the maximum height. It's just, most zoning standards you can at least ask for a variance for. Whether it's going to be granted is going to be very individual, but you can ask for it. Zoning permits with special exception, ZIPSIs, it's basically for as I mentioned, kind of uses that potentially are going to be more impactful. And again, I'll talk about those in a couple of slides. This is just kind of a breakdown of generally, what are we looking at and what does it mean?
Hey, did Z-Pins go away, or are they still? That's another acronym I've seen before.
It is, they have not gone away. They still exist. They're just not handled by us.
Oh, were they never handled
It's-
by you guys?
No.
Okay, all right.
The
You can-
only
you can
time we would
skip it.
see anything. Sorry, what?
I was gonna say, sorry, I don't want you to answer for something that's not, I just thought the Z pin was also a BOA thing, so sorry.
Z pins are appealable to the BOA.
Ah,
We don't have
maybe
anything to
that's
do with
why.
approving them. If someone has approved them and a neighbor's mad about it, they could appeal that to us, but we're not part of the actual approving process.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Sure. No worries. So looking at delays of enforcement, I listed the code section for where you can find information on that if you want to pull it up. It's basically for existing non-compliant conditions that come to the board under an order to cease and desist. So this would be something like, I built a shed, the shed's in front of my house, it's not allowed to be in front of my house. We could look at a variance to let you keep it there, but we'd say, it's really out of character with the neighborhood. There's not a reason it has to be there, you just put it there. We're not going to let you keep it, but maybe we'll give you some more time to move it. We can grant up to 6 months of a delay for an order. If that's not enough time, we can give you an additional 6 months. To do that, you have to file a new case, come back to the board for a new hearing, make a new request. The code does specifically say you can ask twice. That's all you can do. Anything beyond that, you're going to be subject to enforcement from the city, and that could be fines, citations, all that fun stuff. There is also a stay of enforcement, which is only offered in a very specific instance. It is only offered for when there is an existing condition where there is a number of dwelling units that is larger than what's allowed by code. This could be something where you have a property that you bought that was originally built as a single family residence, at some point in the past was converted to a duplex. It was not converted with permits, it was not legally established, and it's in a single unit district. It's something that is not allowed to be there and has come to the city's attention. It's something that we can't grant a variance for. So what we can do is look at it and say, you can have up to 5 years before you have to convert it back. That is the one and only situation that this section is used for. Every other delay of enforcement is only 6 months at a time with two requests. This one we can grant up to 5 years. Variances, and I think this is kind of probably what most of the questions would be about. Variances are what we look at in the vast majority of our cases. This is the biggest reason that our board exists, is to look at variances. And kind of the short version is variances are exceptions to certain standards in the zoning code. It's things where you want to build a project or have built a project, you don't meet the zoning standards, and you want to ask if you can keep it or do it anyway. That's pretty much it. Sorry, if you could give me, I think it's just a delay. Sorry, my 3-year-old had to up and let me know that the doorbell rang, and I'm sure that we have another Amazon package.
No problem. Thank you.
Because it's that time of year. So yeah, variance requests, these are going to come in either through orders to cease and desist for existing non-compliant conditions, or through permit denials for proposed conditions. So currently variances are granted based on hardship in the code. That is how it has been basically since Denver has been around. There is some discussion about changing that, but as of now, this is what variances are granted based on. So pretty much all of my information is based on the current Denver zoning code. Not sure if everyone is aware that Denver has 2 zoning codes to just make things easy. We have the former Chapter 59 code, which was the code up until 2010. In 2010, we largely rezoned to the Denver zoning code. It's not complete. There are still pockets of former Chapter 59, but most of what we see is Denver zoning code. So that's kind of what I put the information based on.
Hey, Austin, on hardship, are there any rules around that you can point us to that we can edify ourselves? I can't make as much profit as I wanted. Obviously, it's not a hardship. I can't afford this is a hardship. I mean, so like, is there somewhere where some of what's acceptable as a hardship versus what's not acceptable is outlined somewhere so we can understand that better?
Yep. So here, section 12475 DZC. So that's what covers kind
gosh,
of
sorry.
the general hardship criteria. And actually, just real fast, and share a different window, which is that section. So this is the excerpt from the code that says what is an unnecessary hardship. So there are 5 flavors of hardship under the Denver zoning code. There is disability, there's unusual conditions, designated historic property or district, compatibility with the existing neighborhood, and non-conforming or compliant uses in existing structures. Those are the 5 options for hardship. So that's what you have to meet. So when our board looks at a variance request, this is what we have to find. Anything else is certainly nice and can give a good history or maybe, deeper explanation for what's going on. But this is what the board has to find if we're going to approve something. With the exception of the disability hardship, the one there in A, everything is related to the property. It's not related to the people that live in the property. There are also variance criteria specific or applicable to all variance requests, which again says that would not, other than allowed in section A for disability, to accommodate persons with disability, relate to people that live in the structure. So the idea is that variances are intended to relate to the land. There's supposed to be something unusual about the property where you can't comply with the code and maybe you need relief from the code. The 2 most common things that we see are going to be unusual conditions or compatibility with the existing neighborhood. It's been a couple years since we had anything related to non-conforming or compliant uses in existing structures. It just doesn't come up that much. I think most recently when we saw it, it would be something like a marijuana grow facility that established in like half of an industrial structure, and they've been really successful and they want to expand. The code changed since they established. It's no longer an allowed use, but it's fine to stay if you legally established there. If you're going to expand your area, though, the only way you can do it is with a variance under the non-conforming or compliant uses in existing structures. It's not something that's come up recently. It's still something we can approve. We also don't see a ton of designated historic property or district requests. We do see some. With those, it's basically intended where if you're in a historic district, you have a historic property, the intent of the code is to kind of give deference to Landmark. If Landmark says, we understand that there's a bulk plane and we understand that's important, but in this area, it's common for people to have dormers on the second floor. We want dormers on this property. It's going to go through the bulk plane. We don't care. We want them with dormers. In a situation like that, usually they'll write us a letter of historic hardship. The board will look at it and say, Landmark says it should be there. It'll positively impact the character of the area. We should approve it. It's not just that any property in a historic district should be, should get a variance for something. It has to be that there's a need to better fit into the district to comply with Landmark's requests. So those are the less common ones. The 2 most common we see are going to be unusual conditions or compatibility with the existing neighborhood. And these are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Unusual conditions, in a nutshell, says, my property is atypical in this area. It is going to be more shallow, more narrow. There's going to be too much of a slope to it. Basically, there's something unusual about my property where complying with the standards is more challenging for me than it is for other people. In order to overcome those challenges, I feel that a variance is necessary for X, Y, Z. Compatibility, on the other hand, says, in this area, it is more common for people not to meet the standards than it is to meet the standards. Because the development pattern doesn't meet the current standards, we would like to also not meet the development or the current standards. And that could be something like, you're in an older area of town, all the houses were built in the early 1900s. At the time that it was developed, all the houses were built up to the north property line. South side was left open. Everybody's a foot or 2 from the property line. Current code says 5 feet is what you need for a setback. You'd be coming in trying to build a new house and you'd say, everyone else on the block has a 1 foot setback on the north side. My house is going to look weird if I put it at 5 feet. I'd like to put it at 1 foot also, even though that doesn't meet code. That would be an example where you can look and say, yeah, going down the block, everybody's at 1 foot from the north property line. It makes sense for you to put it there too. That'll look in character for the block. So those are the variance criteria in a very quick run through. We do also, sorry, as I change my window here.
Good stuff. Thank you.
We do also have variance criteria applicable to all variances. So this is something that we have to find for all cases. Some of these kind of come into play a little bit more often than others. One of the main ones is that first one there, which is just a very important thing that kind of limits and specifies what our authority is that we can't grant a variance that would authorize a primary, accessory, or temporary use that's not allowed in the district. Basically, we can modify aspects of a project, but if the district doesn't allow something, we can't let you have it. So that comes into play in limiting where we can approve ADUs. So if you're in a district that allows ADUs, but maybe some aspect of your design won't be met in the design standards, like if you need to build into a setback, if you need an ADU that's slightly larger for some reason, we could vary that. If you're in a district where ADUs aren't allowed, we can't let you have one. It's a use that's not allowed in the district. So that section pretty much limits who even comes in front of us, because if we have no authority to approve it, then really can't even hear the case. Also, specifically in the code, it says that we can't grant a variance if the only hardship that you're presenting is a financial hardship. It is very frustrating for a lot of people that that's the case, and I certainly understand why. I believe the intent of that is that claiming financial hardship would kind of open the doors to all sorts of things, and it would really incentivize people to not bother getting permits or trying to follow standards. If you built a whole house without permits and it doesn't meet any of the zoning standards, you could then claim, well, it's already in place, it's going to cost too much to tear it down, you should just let me keep it, which isn't really what the intent of the zoning variance is for. It's for, you know, if there's some aspect where you really need it, not just that you did all this stuff without seeking approval and now you're kind of in this spot. So because of that, it can't only be financial hardship. Obviously, financial hardship is something you can bring up, you can discuss, it can be some kind of history and backstory on something, but it can't be the sole reason for us to approve something.
Hey, Austin, I just want to do a quick
Yes.
time check. We're at 7:34. And I know we still have, I don't know, 14 more pages.
Just mostly.
I don't know how quickly you can move through them and whether this was the meat of the stuff and how many questions people have, because we do want to allow folks to be able to ask questions. I will be able to let you go 10 more minutes. That's including Q&A, so we can wrap up with other people waiting as
Sure.
well. So just, and you know what, Austin, we might want you come back again, because I'm sure, and maybe next time we will take up a particular case that is moving, and for us to understand what's at play here and how should we be thinking about it? What are we missing? So just,
Sure.
we may invite you back.
Fair enough. I'll try to do an abbreviated go through of the next little bit. Like I said, I think variances are probably the most relevant and important thing to discuss. So hopefully that was at least a quick overview, kind of 101 on what those look like, what the board needs to look at for that. So ZIPSI requests, it's a use that's allowed, but maybe it's going to be impactful. The most common things that we see are going to be like a restaurant that's right in the middle of a residential area, or a restaurant patio that's nearby the residential. It's, you're allowed to have it. It's mostly fine, but we need to look at it and see if there are certain conditions, maybe on hours, maybe on noise, maybe on location of a patio, things like that. It's also for automotive repair uses. I believe those now have to all be established through ZIPSI, and also utility uses. They're not things we see terribly often. Mostly we see restaurant patios and things like that. That's just what comes up more often. Criteria is there. It touches on many similar things from the variance criteria, but it is a little bit different. For the sake of time, I will bypass that. Feel free to read it over at your leisure. I did also note the code section where you can find it in the code. Appeals of administrative decisions, I think I already talked about with a question. It's basically looking at, did the city err in deciding something? Did they decide something in error? So to look at that, like I said, it covers a lot of ground. It could be for an individual property. It could be a question of a rulemaking decision, covers a lot of ground, and it has to really look at, what does the code require? How did the city make their decision? Did they make that in line with the requirements of the code, or did they fail to adequately consider it? It can be for just about anything in the code, so it's a lot of stuff. For our board to approve something, you need to get 4 out of 5 votes. That is to grant any sort of relief from what the city is asking you to do. If there's any motion that is for something, but it doesn't get 4 votes, it fails. If a motion fails, then whatever the action of the city is that's being appealed is going to stand. So just quick timeline of a case. As I noted at the beginning, we're not the first people you talk to. You first talk to CPD and then you come to us. You need an official action to start a case with us. So once you have that, you can come and file a case. If this is going to be for an existing condition, it's going to be that cease and desist order. Once you have that, you can appeal that to us. If it's going to be a permit, it's going to be something called an informal denial. It's a fairly short document. It's basically a fee schedule that gives us the assurance that you've gone far enough with CPD that they think you're ready to file with us. It's something that they issue solely so you can file with our office. Once you have a case filed, we schedule a hearing date. Most hearings are scheduled about 4 to 8 weeks after a case is filed. We've been kind of on the shorter end for the past year or two. We are a little bit longer now just because we don't have hearings Christmas and New Year's week. So that's pushed us out a little bit, but 4 to 8 weeks is what we typically operate under. So when a case is filed, we send out an initial notice email. This is something that you all should be getting. I don't think that we have a tremendous amount of cases where we have to contact you all, but certainly we have some. This email goes out to any RNO within 200 feet of a site. It goes out to the city council representative for a district, and it goes out to CPD staff. We send this out with a fairly vague description of what the case is about. Reason for that is because, as noted, you need an informal denial to file for a proposed case. The informal denial has limited information for us. Part of what this initial notice is for is to let CPD staff know that, hey, this case is actually moving forward. They've filed with us. Now we need you to prepare a document called a formal denial, which details more specifically what the issues are. It takes more time for them to get together. It, details with specific code sections, specific numbers, what the issues are going to be. It's something they don't put together unless a case is actually filed, because a lot of times people think, yeah, I'm going to pursue it, and then just don't. So to save time for them, because they are certainly backlogged, they only actually produce that document if a case has been filed. Because we don't have that when the case is filed, we try to keep our case subject description a little bit more generic, just so that we are not mischaracterizing something unintentionally. We would rather send out this notice as early as possible rather than wait until we have more detail, just so if you are interested in the case, you have more time to reach out to people. I know a lot of RNOs only meet about once a month. So, if someone files a case the day before your meeting, you're not going to have time to meet with them before that. And maybe the hearing is going to be by the time your next meeting. So just to try and give you as much notice as possible, we try to send it out right away. After we get more information from CPD, then we're going to send out the more detailed application. This will also go out to the same people, but this is going to have more information. It's specifically what is the case about, what code sections are at issue, what statement has the applicant provided about their issue. And with our notice requirements, we have to send it out at least 10 days ahead of the hearing. That is the bare minimum. We send it out as soon as we are able to. Sometimes it takes CPD a while to get us the information. If they don't have it to us before 10 days from a hearing, we have to reschedule them. So 10 days is the bare minimum. So we provide notice for the hearing in a few ways. One, I mentioned we send out the initial notice as soon as possible, just to let you know that, hey, this is coming down. If you're interested, reach out to us, reach out to the applicants. Happy to provide more information if you're interested. We send out the application once we do have more information. We do post a physical public notice sign on the property that has the same 10-day notice requirement. So that'll be up for over the weekend and then next week through Tuesday. And then we do also post notice on our website. We have a tab for recently filed cases, just whatever's been filed in the past 8 weeks. And then a more detailed agenda page for what's coming up the next week or two.
Hey, Austin,
this
what makes it into that database that has all the filters on the left? I've always found it really clunky to try to use. So part of that makes me think, I just don't know how it's, designed. Because I
It
go in
is-
there with numbers like the case number and it just doesn't come up. What is
Sure.
that database?
So that database was initially intended to be kind of historic research. If you wanted to look, have you had a case on this property? Or I know that there was a case from 2001 on this property. Can I find it? It pulls information straight from our back end database. It does update fairly regularly, but the amount of information that's up there is a little bit limited. It's going to be what's the case number, what's the address, what was the subject, and is there a action of the board? Is there an outcome to this hearing? So
Are those
cases that
closed
haven't been heard
cases?
yet. Sorry,
Are
what?
those closed cases then? Only?
Closed and open cases. It's both.
Okay, open too. Okay.
The thing with the open cases is it will list a hearing date that is in the future and there's no action of the board on it.
Right, that's fine.
So it is something that I think that I have working fine, and then I will periodically hear from someone that they're having an issue with it and learn that it's not working fine, and then I try and get it fixed again. I don't know how to set up databases. That's not in my skill set. So I have to work with tech services and have them try and help me and get it usable. We recently just changed it so that it's theoretically a little bit more usable. Because I think we were having an issue where it didn't recognize cases in the future. It only looked in the past. So if we had an upcoming hearing, you couldn't find anything about it.
That's what I've
That
noticed.
should be working.
Okay, all right. I'm going to try again tomorrow and see if I can find stuff. Thank you.
Sure. Hopefully it's better. Like I said, it's not something I know a ton about how to put together. I don't know that. It's not in my background. But certainly if there is a case that's coming up, you can always reach out to our office. We're happy to provide more information, answer any questions we can.
Are you
Yeah.
the right contact, or should we be going to the inspector? A lot of times it's Bridget. I mean, Bridget, I know just because of the cases we've seen, maybe you guys have the city broken up into quadrants, but are you the right contact, or is Bridget the inspector the right contact?
So you'll reach me. So probably me. Our office is much smaller than CPD. We have a much smaller case volume that comes through. You can almost always reach me the same day. I would not say that about most other people in CPD. They're much harder to reach. They have a heavier workload. It's nothing that I'm, blaming them. There's a good reason that they are harder to reach.
I can vouch
so-
for that.
Yeah,
Austin and I just talked about this under a week ago and he came to present. So I can vouch for him responding really quickly. Thank you.
sure. It's something that I try to make a point that, if we can get back to you quickly, we're going to get back to you quickly. If your questions are about the case that's coming up, probably reach out to us. If your questions are about something else about the development, I probably won't know. I know nothing about what's being developed until someone walks up and files a case with me. So if it's been in development with the city, that something's coming down the pike, but they haven't filed yet, I will have zero information. We are a separate department from CPD. I can't just pull any of their records. I would have to contact the inspector and say, hey, what's going on with this property? So if you have questions that's not directly related to one of our cases, probably reach out to them. If it's about our case, reach out to me.
Thank you.
And we have 3 staff. We're a very small department. So, it's me, it's Phil, it's Stacy. There's not many of us. Any of us should be fine to reach out to with questions. So whoever's fine. This just talks a little bit about the hearing. I know that I'm pretty much out of time.
You're out of time.
So yeah, I don't know if it'd be more helpful to just answer questions if there are any questions or.
And we have
Sure.
limited time for questions as well, because we've got somebody else
Yeah.
coming up, but are
Fair
there
enough.
any burning questions that someone has that must be asked?
Well, I would just point out that we don't seem to have heard about the case that's coming on 4226 Clay. And I mean, I'm not for or against it because I don't know what's going on with it. And I just brought it up at our meeting because I saw their sign. And
Sure.
so how do we address the fact that the system doesn't seem to have involved us, the owner doesn't seem to involve us, and we don't know if our opinion is important in this
So
case
I want to
particularly.
say one thing. We would get this notification, but unless we have reason to participate, and that's either for or against, and mostly we would be thinking about like why we wouldn't, because if they needed our support, they reach out to us. So, we probably have gotten this notification. The issue is it something we want to act on? And I think that's a separate issue, Jonathan. But to your point, if the person doesn't engage with us, do they need to? If they don't need our support, do they need to? If they can do it without us, but I don't know. I want to make sure that, it's not the city's fault if the notification didn't reach you. I will take the blame for that. But if they don't engage us, do we want to engage? That's an internal question, Jonathan.
So when people file cases with us, our general recommendation is, reach out to whatever RNOs we contact. We will send you that list of people.
Yep.
Put together an email, say, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is why I would like to do it. I'm happy to meet with you and discuss. If you don't care, that's fine. People don't always take our advice, but that's our general advice. And the thing is, there's a couple hundred RNOs. Some of them are very active, some of them really are not. Some of them get involved in a lot of cases, some really don't. Because there's quite a variety, our general recommendation is reach out, see if you have people that are interested in meeting with you. If so, and you can get support is always better than opposition, and maybe they will be interested. Or maybe people won't care, and that's fine. Probably not going to be out too much time putting together one email to send people. But again, not everyone does.
Thanks, Austin. I do think, Jonathan, to your point, this is an internal conversation, and we can put it on the agenda for next month. Like, what do we do with every notification? We get quite a few. And as we move toward a new website, we want to make all of that public. The city is also thinking about how to take that responsibility off of us by making all notifications much, easier to find and to publicize. So there's also that going on. But internal conversation is, when do we act and when do we not act? But I don't think that's an issue for Austin per se. I think that's an internal issue. Any other questions before we let Austin go? And Austin, thank you so much for
Sure.
this stuff. I really do think that we may have a follow-up potentially, as people, especially this group, who is kind of the group who pays attention to these things. We may have additional things that we want to talk about, like, how do we find cases? How do we navigate the website, right? We didn't get a chance to do that because half an
Sure.
hour is just not enough.
Sure.
Anybody
And,
else have a
if
question?
if there are individual questions that, it's maybe not for the whole group, feel free to just follow up with me directly.
You want to throw your email in the chat so folks have it.
Sure.
And I really appreciate the last minute short notice. You definitely had way more information than we could even get to, which is always the case here for us. But anybody else have a question for Austin before we move to the last couple of updates that we need to get through? All right, Austin, thank
Great.
you. We can
Sure.
let you go, but you know what? You're on our radar. We're going to reach out to you more often because we just want to get smarter about some of this stuff.
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yep. You got it. Guys, have a good night.
Yeah, you too. All right, so we got a couple of quick updates on, so Billy Wang's project. This is one we talked about last month where he's got a project, he's got a property sandwiched between 2 8-stories and was asking whether we'd be supportive of it. He is going to apply, he's going to go through the pre-app application next week. So that's on our radar for next month. And then for the Phillips Automotive SUNY project, he asked for additional changes, and that resulted in the hearing getting pushed back. We don't have a new date, but the changes that he is looking for, and we don't have the official, email from BOA, but it includes a setback issue and a potential height issue. What he's adding is between the 3 buildings, 2 already exist. They're already at the lines that they're in. And the 3rd building that he is proposing, that, and he's looking at 2 kind of supplemental buildings that connect, the garage to the little steeple, little center, little office, and then from that to the new building that he's building. So all of that, he's looking at aligning to the same, line that the 2 buildings are at, which results in a setback issue. So, however, I think it's 2-3 months away before that hearing's going to happen. So I haven't gotten a new date, nor have I gotten a new update on what the variances are. So we're going to have to talk about that. Now, on the one variance that we're aware of, we have had, hold on, let me just pull up my notes, 51 responses to that survey, and 48 were for and 3 were against. That's still the same story. A couple of people put in notes about what they were against. One was, I oppose until owners clarify if they will place solar panels or tiles, and if the entire property and buildings will be electrified. The other person wrote, the zoning rules are clear. Why do they think it doesn't apply? So 3 against it out of 51. So overwhelmingly supportive. And those are the 2 comments. And on the support side, obviously 48 in support. Everybody was for more commercial versus residential. Everyone liked the adaptive reuse and not, raising the buildings that exist and adding to it, and then walkable neighborhoods, and wanting that and appreciating that this adds to that. Those were the comments for. However, we're going to wait for a new date and additional variances. And at that point, we're going to have to figure out how we now go back and pull the same people and say, there's been an addition to that. So that'll be a logistic thing that we need to decide. And on Billy Wang, he's going through the pre-app project. So those are the only 2 updates. He'll be up next in January with an update on that. But what I did want to add, this is a new thing, is Sam Axelrath. We talked about this earlier. He's the one with the petition on 44th and Tejon. So I want to turn it over to Sam to give him the last few minutes that we have.
Thank you. And thanks, guys, for letting me sneak in at the end here. I'm somebody who gets off work 6:30, a little late, and then have a little commute. So I just had to slip in this way. So very, very quickly, the reason I'm here is because the petition has collected over 435 signatures. And we've also had an article in the Denver North Star that came out in this most recent newspaper for November. We have talked about a little bit about this meeting, and I'm interested in hearing ideas about next steps of how to leverage some of this grassroots support for, just in case you're not familiar, the petition is asking the redevelopment at Tejon and 44th, right across from the park and Monkey Barrel. And it's asking to include commercial on the ground floor there, so we don't lose that space as like public interest and walking interest. So you all know more than I do about how to leverage things, so that's why I'm here. Is there anything we can ask of Amanda Sandoval? Anything we can ask of the NPI? And I'm open to other ideas just real quick.
All right, so I as I put in the chat, when we were originally talking about the agenda right at the start of the meeting and the fact that you'd be coming on, we kind of just naturally went to this topic of the 44th corridor. So, we at least, unless we have ideas, and I think folks may be open to this, how we can continue to petition this landowner. Okay, there's one. But one of the upsides to what you were doing was this broader issue of a design overlay for all of 44th, okay? And to make sure that that's on the radar of policymakers. And that is on Amanda's radar, that's on NPI's radar. And this committee is also thinking, okay, well, NPI might not be able to start till next April. What can we do between now and April to be getting engagement, putting it on people's, radar about this is coming and we need support. Okay, so we have that kind of going on. So, all of the work that you put in and your effort is not for waste because we do have a bigger picture. What I did share with the group earlier was that I reached out to the inspector on this site development plan, and it's been approved. And this group, the owner has probably spent a good 18 months getting to this point. So our ability to impact this property is smaller and smaller than when we first realized this wasn't going to be commercial, right? Now, having said that, completely open to ideas. And as an organization, speaking for SUNY as a larger organization, we're going to be supportive of any, people wanting to continue that effort. And there was conversation earlier about, maybe we can start publicizing that, this property is not going to be commercial. Maybe you think it is. Maybe you think, have you read the zone and you think all of 44th is, but you don't understand that there's a loophole that they don't have to. So what can we do, right? So there's that next step. One, I think we may have lost this battle unless somebody has ideas about how to pursue this further in the public opinion, right? And then the second is, how do we leverage what you've done? Because I think it's significant, 400 people, they have 600 people who took a survey for 4 neighborhoods, okay? This is a city process with money. You got 400 people talking about one project in our neighborhood. So we have a little bit of the wind behind us on this to move forward and say, we should be pursuing this with the city, with our council to make this happen so that this isn't repeated. That's kind of where we are. Want to open this up. I'm sure we're running out of time, but did I miss anything? Do we have any real actions besides making sure NPI and Amanda Sandoval? No, we want to move towards this. And Melissa, if you have anything to add to this, Bill mentioned that design overlay is being pursued on 32nd and Lowell, and that maybe there is a capstone kind of project, and maybe we're going to look at both of these as something to study.
So we had hoped to have 2 capstone students. We only received 1. That said, we haven't met with that capstone student. And once we do, we'll be able to kind of judge how much work we can give them and what the scope of our project can be. We had promised to do 32nd already, but the councilwoman does have an interest in adding Sunnyside. We're just going to have to see how much workload we can give them.
And so Sam, I think, even without council, I think this committee would be interested in pursuing this project with the city through the NPI process and assisting the city's NPI process if we can shorten the time somehow. For instance, if we wait for them to start this in April, that is a few months from now. If this committee and our organization can start the conversation sooner to build up to, what the city and city's resources will add to moving this process and timeline, we should maybe start it sooner, right? So that's kind of where our group could help in jumpstarting this conversation with the community even before the city is ready to have this conversation.
Yeah, I still think, Trupti, though, the unfortunate fact is that this project that we're speaking about is already so far down the process, and it's use by right that that we're pretty limited on what we can do here, other than just expressing our disappointment that it doesn't contain,
Is
commercial at the ground level.
is the owner aware of the petition?
Well, we had a reporter reach out to him. You would think that he is.
Yeah, we're not sure because there was no comment received by the reporter. The owner of this property, as far as I have heard, has not responded to anybody. So I'm not sure about that.
I'm going to reach out to him again. I don't think we have an opportunity here. I do think that that is kind of the sad thing here. But again, I think the work you did speaks to a bigger issue about this corridor and not this corner. Although this corner to me is very,
Key.
it's key and it's important. This is the one not to have lost, but this is where we are. So, I mean, we are interested in saving the rest of the corridor or making sure that it is built up to service the folks who actually live here in some way. But what else? And Sam, what do you have ideas? What would you like to see us do that we're not thinking of?
So I'll be real quick here, guys. Thank you. My only ideas at this point, because I hear you that, it's very far along. Obviously our only option left is just simply to pressure the property owner to change his mind. Slim chances, but I think the only route would be to put our heads together, figure out what is our message to him, what is our offer. I know there was some thought of saying, hey, you can go with a third, we'll give you a third story, total 3, if you include commercial on the bottom. So I think if we can unify our message as much as possible, put that out to him, that's one. And then also just continuing to somehow pressure him publicly.
What does that look like? What do you think pressuring him publicly looks like?
I wonder if it could be an event where people are gathering for that purpose, and there might be some sort of media coverage. Something that would gather a little bit of attention for that purpose.
If, for example, we were to support like the additional story, I'm not even sure if that's a track we could take with the city. I mean, maybe Austin would be the person to ask about that with variances.
No, it wouldn't be Austin. It would actually be CPD and NPI.
Well, first we would obviously start with them, but they're not allowed to grant variance to allow that because it's not in the code yet. So
however,
what we would be saying to him was that if you go for a rezone, you have our 100% support from this group and these 500, 400 people.
And also,
so you're gonna get, like, off the record, he would get it because of all that groundswell support. But the guy won't even talk to us.
Well, and also, if NPI recommendations start moving towards upzoning our transit corridors potentially, right? Because that's, this is where the missing middle piece of, hey, let's take a single and duplex and allow 3 or 4. If the room allows. I mean, obviously there's rules, but this is where the giving you height along our corridors is a conversation. And I think NPI folks is who we can bring in. And if this becomes a recommendation, even a draft recommendation, we can then jump on from there and saying it's doable because this is actually being considered. Today, we can't say that.
And we've heard that they're open to that. Is, Jonathan, when you said that, we've reached out and they have not responded back, is that's
been me.
Potentiality of expanding the density or height been offered to them or even just suggested? Is that
it has not? It has not.
Oh, we have not. So we don't even know if
because
they would be open to that sort of possibility.
No,
they don't answer anything from.
They haven't answered us because they don't have to. I will reach out to this individual. I'll send you what I think I'm going to put it in the email, like, like the bullet points to cover and why we're reaching out and why we think this is important. Covers like the 500 people or 400 people plus, other pieces. And see if they respond. But again, they're a year and a half into this, and it costs a lot of money to go through this stuff. And unless he has a lot of money, which I hear he has, and these are rentals, which that's my understanding. They're not for sale, they're rentals. And that changes the equation a little bit, because someone who wants to sell and be out is different than someone who's renting. Someone who's renting may potentially be open to,
Yeah.
the leasing properties of commercial, but that's
Yeah.
another business model problem, right? So
Well, we have
don't
we have
know.
a problem property across the street from us that has had successive issues with
Okay.
tenants. And,
All right, you
and
guys-
you would think that a owner would be open to neighborhood, criticism, but they're not. They don't care. And it's
All
been
right, so
yeah.
it's 8:07, so I want to be
Oh, yeah.
respectful of people's time. So Sam, like kind of this messaging and this pressure campaign is something that I think our group needs to discuss really quickly and potentially act on really quickly. Anything else as far as your ideas of what we can do?
No, I
Before I
definitely
close.
think it's those two, is finding a unified message and a unified offer that we can give this person. Like I love your idea of the bullet points. Let's Trupti, if you can run that by me, just offer my ideas. MPI, anybody else who can like get in on that unified message. And then I'm willing to pressure, I'm willing to, I'd love to talk to you guys about sort of other ways to make it visible.
Yeah, I think this is really important. I'd like to continue this, and even if we can't, we're too late maybe on this one, this needs to be the launching point for continuing down the rest of 44th. I mean, the poster child for this is the corner of
Yes.
44th and Tennyson,
Yes.
with the building on the southeast corner there. And I think that just, goes to show what happens and is going to be in our legacy for the next 50 years, at least, if we let this continue to happen. So
Hey, thank you. Hey, Melissa, by the way, like on the Santa Fe design overlay, did we fix the issue on the text amendment? Did we fix the issue of 3 to 5 stories, right? Because apparently Tennyson was 5 stories plus. We realized this for application to Jamie Torres, that she needed it to be at 3 plus, and we're kind of in that similar area because we're around that. Does the new text amendment fix this so it's adoptable?
Yeah, it will. It has not been adopted yet, right? So we're not there yet. But it will, it's our goal that it will fix it.
Okay, so it's more neutral on the number of stories, but the fact that, or is it 3 plus?
3 plus, because 2, you still get some benefits with 2, but you don't have a commercial space requirement.
Okay, so I think this is something we have to think about, this group, because I think we have MS2 and MS3 on the 44th corridor. Therefore, we should be moving towards an MX3 plus as a rezone for that corridor, and then also having to apply this overlay. Otherwise, there's these issues that it doesn't address. So something more for continuing this conversation for next month. I think we should keep this on our radar and also be working towards, assisting Sam, which is really assisting what most of us are thinking we need to be doing. All right. Thank you, everyone, for going
Thanks, guys.
over.
Hang on. So I'm all for assisting Sam. I think when we look at the bigger picture beyond that, the timeline of NPI finishing their stuff, writing their recommendations, redoing the modern version of Blueprint Denver is too long a timeline for us to get reasonable solutions. I think we need to be looking to say, how can we apply an overlay to this corridor that effectively gets what the people want, which is actually more business, right? Not less. So it's really popular. And how quickly can we get that in place? And I think Sam's 400 people is just an amazingly powerful springboard to give us the reason to do that.
It so
440,
is.
guys. When you
It
tell
so
them
is.
Shifty, 440.
Hey. Wait, so the question here is, I think Sandoval's office, and Melissa, correct me, they're defaulting to NPI because we have that as an option to move stuff forward through. So we're not being assisted on a design overlay because we have NPI, where, you know, West Highland is, because they don't have another tool and a process in motion right now. And so NPI can subsequently do this. And I actually think that it is the right way to go. And I think our job should be to make that timeline shorter by assisting, getting in front of this now, not when they want to get started, when we want to get started. So we start building the support for it starting next month, right? Whatever that looks like, but starting next month, so that when they jump in and when it hits their radar of when they have time, they already have a portion of the work done. Because otherwise, if we
What's
did
the
nothing,
timeline for
they're
the
gonna
What's
start.
their
completion of
timeline?
NPI?
Yeah.
Their timeline is definitely not something they have given us, okay?
Right,
But
so
their
it's 3
timeline
years.
is, no. I think it's more next year, okay? Because they want this adopted sometime next year. That's the goal. That means they're simultaneously working, but this process becomes a adjunct, a secondary process that's also needing to move forward. I think we assist them in that process, and we do that by helping them and moving this work forward. So you know what? If it makes sense, maybe I put this on the agenda for next month. I don't know whether they're willing to talk about it, but I can ask them and say, we want to get this started. We want to move forward. We know you're thinking about this. Everybody wants this, but what can we do today to move this forward, to shorten that timeline so we start now? They will jump in with their resources in April, May. We start now.
Well, and my other question would be, and maybe this, Melissa, we could find out, is there a way to sort of place a more, if this is a sort of relatively short-term process, sometime it's going to happen next year, put a moratorium on.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up, because I've got an email out on a moratorium and I can't seem to
Well,
really
I
get a
hate
good
to do,
response.
I hate to do that, but to be able to slow things down a bit so we can get caught back up at the, if it's the NPI route or whatever route.
I would love to
Is there a
hear.
mechanism? Is there a mechanism?
I'd love to
do
hear
that?
about this. I talked to the city attorney, and one of the things is you have to have a real reason to do it. And if the reason is we're pursuing an overlay of sorts and it has a timeline around it, that becomes an okay reason. If you don't have a good reason to do it and you're like, I just want to stop this and I don't know how long I want to stop this, I just want to stop this, not a good way to do it. But at least from the city, and I haven't connected with Amanda, but maybe that is on the radar for us soon, which is a moratorium is actually something we can pursue, but it's subject to whether Amanda wants to take that up.
I just wonder, it's not like my, because I believe.
I
in
started the
use my right
conversation,
and
Rod.
all of-
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
I started
so-
this moratorium
Okay,
conversation already.
okay. Well, because we've already discussed several other properties that are on the market or listed, and they're,
Yes.
if this takes a significant amount of time, I don't want to say it'd be too late, but you know what I mean? Like the character of 44th, if
Yes.
all of these properties changed in the meantime, it would irreparably harm the corridor, in my opinion.
I
But I
didn't
do
know
want to
that
say
was
that
an
there
option.
are
ahead,
some
Melissa.
unusually shallow lots, right? 44th is not Tennyson in that regard. And that is one of the things that we wanted to use our student to look at, is the impact on the shallow lots. Because on the corners, on your big corners on SUNY and Tejon, those are bigger plots. But when you're talking just along 44th, they get very shallow. And so I think we want more information on that before we want to move forward on any moratorium or anything else. So whether we gather that information from 32nd and apply it to 44th, or whether we have the bandwidth to look at 44th as well, I think that would be a discussion with the councilwoman.
So
Thanks.
how do we
Can I
get
just
that
say-
conversation with the councilwoman going? I've already started trying to get that conversation.
We haven't
going.
even met with our student yet.
No, I don't
So,
mean the student. I'm talking about the moratorium. The
right,
moratorium
but we're
being the
not
right
there yet.
tool.
So we want to have some more data. Moratoriums to be passed at council, she has to be able to bring along her colleagues, right? So we want to be able to explain to them why we're doing this and what our plan is. And I don't know if we have the data to do that at this point, although we are, you're certainly welcome to have that council or that chat with the councilwoman, and I'm happy to bring it up with her. But I know that that is a big concern of hers, is addressing and understanding those shallow lots.
So I would love to know how we, as a committee, and reach out to our residents who there's people with all kinds of resources in the neighborhood, ArcGIS and such, to fill in those gaps so that we don't have to wait for other people's, but what's the
That's great.
question?
And I will let her know of your enthusiasm. You have never lacked in enthusiasm. That's great.
That's not
but-
the issue here. The issue is whether a tool exists and
Right, but we're also just trying to see what we need to know.
I
what
haven't
we
gotten a
wanna know.
response on my email about a tool yet. But I've talked to the attorney. The attorney said that this is would be a tool, but no one's responding.
Well,
to my
so I
email.
can tell you, we've done the moratorium when I did slot homes, right? And we had to convince our colleagues why a moratorium was necessary. It's not as easy as you think to bring along the rest of your council members on that journey.
I want to get started.
So,
I want to get
Yeah.
started.
And if I can just throw something out, I think in terms of justifying a moratorium, and what is the justification for that? We have 440 residents that are
That's-
interested in just one of those spots. Then there's more properties with that same issue on 44th, and we have an overlay that's in process.
That
in
is almost a
essence-
justification.
In essence,
The
this person
issue
is
is
kind
a
of
tool.
sneaking in.
no,
A
and I
tool
appreciate
we may
that.
have.
I mean, it's great that we have those 440 voices. That is a true feat. But
With
like I
overlay.
said, the rest of council members are not concerned with District 1.
Well,
It's-
Melissa, I'd like a response from Amanda Sandoval.
oh, and I'm
on
like, I'm
this.
happy to let
There
her know. I
hasn't
will
been
do
one.
that.
He passed the buck to the attorney. I talked to the attorney. We recognize the issue that it's been a passing the buck issue, and that what we're talking about is a potential. I need a response from the powers that be to tell us what we need to do or not do and what's possible. I'm still waiting for that. Because
That's fine.
I
I'm
have
happy to let her know,
not pushed
Christy.
that forward to this meeting. I would love to have an update on this for the January meeting, which is a response of why moratorium as a tool is or is not appropriate. That's what I would like to hear. If it's not appropriate, please tell me why, and then we're there. But if it's appropriate, then this group and the community can work towards the mandate that you guys need to move it. But this is at least a month old at least, this email I sent out, and I still have not had a response from the council person. I have talked to the city attorney, and he was going to bounce back to the council person because it was a bit of a passing of the buck, period. So please, if we
Feel
can.
free to send
hear-
that to me, Troopty. Send me the email that you received from the attorney.
I did not.
I
I had a phone call with him. He was going to be sending an email that says, you and I talked, it needs to go back to council. Have not gotten that email either. And all of that
We
is on my
don't control
radar.
the attorneys, you know that.
That's
That
not the
said-
point. The point is it is possibly appropriate. And there's a bit of a passing of the buck going on. Amanda Sandoval runs the Ludi committee. We have had a moratorium move through, unless she doesn't run it anymore since she's been, she changed. But we had something come through from Jamie Torres, a moratorium on the Park. She and the board. Or
Do you know
whoever
how long
knows
that
the
took?
rules. That's the, but they
Do
know
you
the
realize
rules.
how long that took?
It doesn't matter. She knows the rules. Tell me the rules.
Notice
Tell us the
councilwoman.
rules. Tell us the rules. I mean, this is information that's just not available. And if, unless you tell it to us or the attorney tells it to us, it's not available. So given that, I need a response, period. It's a tool, not a tool, justification. I just want a response. I just don't want to be passed around where everybody says, I don't know. It's not my job. It's the other person's job. Maybe, whatever. Please tell us what the rules are on a moratorium and whether this is an appropriate tool or not. That's it. That's all I want. It may not be, and I'm okay with that. But someone please tell me,
All right, Trupti, I will let her know.
please. I'd love to bring that back to this committee next month to discuss whether it's an appropriate tool given NPI and potentially moving this forward within the next year. So I'd love to be able to update this group. And I haven't shared this with people because I just don't have an answer. But the question has been started for the folks who were talking or thinking about a moratorium. So it's heard. We're working on it. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and energy. Look forward to next month. I'll send out a thing with meeting notes and the link to this recording. Thank you very much,
Hey,
Melissa,
Trupti,
not personal.
Trupti, one thing you forgot to bring up is I have volunteered to help Trupti co-chair.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention it because I know you told me you were going to mention it. And so I just wanted
yeah.
everybody else to know that I'm going to be helping Trupti out and she's going to kind of get me caught up to speed over the next little bit here to help
And
out. with-
Trupti wants us to take a step back also
Yeah,
and give
well,
other people and
I told
other
her she's not allowed to
visions.
do that right off the bat. I need to get
Yeah,
eased
that's what I
in.
hear. But
Yeah.
we got more people willing to participate, and there's actually even more people sitting on the sidelines on various projects that do want to participate. We just gotta, have the right things for them to jump in on. So we do have a lot more going on, and I am so happy and thrilled to have Rod doing this. He's helped Sunny
So
quite a bit on the overlay.
And if anybody has any suggestions about how, let me know. If like next month, I'm hoping to sort of run the agenda and that sort of thing. So
Yes.
give me some feedback as I jump in. So.
Thanks, Rod. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I know you didn't have it on the agenda, so thanks.
And it's also been very far past our meeting. Thank you for everybody who
Yeah.
held on. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, reach out and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much. Take care.
everybody.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll talk again in January.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.